My name is Riley, and I'm 31 years old. I live in a cozy brownstone near Prospect Park in Brooklyn, New York, where food trucks line the streets and jazz music floats out from hidden basements. My mornings begin with a strong cold brew, a jog past the Grand Army Plaza, and journaling ideas on the steps of the library. I work as a forensic linguist for a private research firm analyzing language patterns in legal documents, decoding anonymous letters, and helping law enforcement solve cold cases through the power of words. It's a job that requires clarity, honesty, and instinct skills I once assumed were universal in family. But life has a rude way of testing those assumptions, especially when the lies don't come from a stranger or a criminal you're profiling, but from someone you once rocked to sleep in your arms, your niece. Nicole. Family dynamics are funny in that twisted way. We say we'd do anything for blood, but sometimes blood drains us faster than strangers ever could. There's an unspoken expectation to endure more, to forgive quicker, to serve longer. And when you draw a boundary, you're suddenly the villain in someone else's chaotic narrative. Nicole was once a freckled, loud-laughing girl with grass stains on her knees and a lollipop perpetually in her hand. She used to follow me around at family barbecues, calling me her big sis aunt. I didn't mind. I never had siblings, so maybe that's why I clung to that connection more than I should have. I bought her first notebook, taught her how to tie her shoes backward just for fun, and let her stay up late watching crime documentaries when she hit 13. We had a rhythm. But somewhere along the way, maybe in college, maybe after her second heartbreak, maybe the moment she realized people could be manipulated, if you smiled long enough, Nicole changed. The lies didn't come all at once. No, that would have been too easy to spot. They crept in like slow rot. The babysitter canceled when I later found out the sitter had never been booked. The kids have school today on a national holiday. I'll be back by 7, and then midnight would chime with no explanation, no apology. And I believed her. Because that's what we do when we want to protect someone. We believe the unbelievable excuse, the inexcusable, and patch the cracks with hopeful glue. But there's a difference between helping and being used as a ladder someone keeps climbing without ever offering a hand back down. I remember one morning vividly. I was in the middle of reviewing linguistic data from an extortion case when Nicole called, panicked. Her voice cracked, saying her youngest had a fever, the school wouldn't take him, and she couldn't miss a second day of work or she'd be fired. Without thinking, I dropped everything. Showed up with soup, took notes from the pediatrician, even cleaned her kitchen while the toddler slept. 2 days later, I ran into her coworker at a bookstore, who cheerfully mentioned Nicole had taken time off for a spa retreat. The fever. The job emergency fiction. It wasn't just a lie, it was a performance, and I had been her favorite audience member. Still, I didn't cut her off. Not then. Because guilt is a powerful drug, and I kept telling myself, she's overwhelmed. She's a single mom. She doesn't mean it. But deep down, I knew I was slowly being carved into a role I never auditioned for, the dependable fool. The one who'd always pick up the pieces, pay the bills, rock the babies, and never ask why she disappeared so often behind those perfectly curated Instagram smiles. Sometimes I'd catch myself in the mirror after a long day of babysitting her 3 wild little ones, my shirt stained with applesauce, hair frizzed into disobedience, and I'd laugh. A bitter little laugh, like a punchline no one else heard. Once, I actually whispered to myself, is this what forensic linguists do now? Solve the mystery of who clogged the toilet? Light moments still lived in those days, like when her middle child once called me Aunt Riles the Rescue Ranger after I patched up his scraped knee with glittery band-aids. Or the time the oldest drew a stick figure family that included me and said, "You're the fun mom. Mommy's the loud mom." But those giggles couldn't drown out the gnawing ache of being lied to again and again. Love without respect becomes labor. And the weight of one woman's refusal to take responsibility was slowly collapsing on my spine. Here's the thing no one tells you about family: loving them doesn't mean letting them wreck you. Setting boundaries isn't betrayal. It's the bravest way of saying I still care about you, but I care about myself too. Share your thoughts about Nicole's decision. Was she being too harsh? Or was she simply protecting herself after years of being hurt? This question invites readers to reflect on the importance of setting boundaries in family relationships and on the courage it takes to choose self-respect over blind loyalty. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I'd love to know where you're listening from around the world. Thank you for listening to Nicole's story. Don't forget to share your thoughts and follow for more honest and meaningful family stories. Nicole didn't become a liar overnight. I think that's what makes it harder. If someone's always been dishonest, you learn how to armor yourself. But when the dishonesty comes from someone you trusted since they were knee-high, it feels more like a betrayal of memory than just a broken promise. She used to call me her safe place. I wore that title like a badge of honor. I was the one she ran to after her first breakup, the one who taught her how to make scrambled eggs without burning the pan, the one who helped her fill out college applications, while her mom, my sister, was too busy chasing her fourth boyfriend of the year. I knew her mess. I'd seen it. I thought that meant I could handle it. But when Nicole had her first child at 23, something shifted in our dynamic. I was no longer just the cool aunt. I became the backup parent. At first it was occasional an afternoon here, an emergency pickup there. But slowly, like moss creeping over stone, it grew. Requests started coming in rapid succession. Can you watch them while I run to the store? Can you take them for the weekend so I can rest? Can you pick up formula? Oh, and maybe diapers too. One time she texted, "I'll be right back, just grabbing groceries," and returned 5 hours later with acrylic nails and a suspicious sunburn. I bit my tongue so hard that day I tasted blood. It wasn't that I didn't love the kids, I did. Fiercely. Each one of them had some spark I couldn't resist. The youngest had a contagious belly laugh that turned even the worst day into a comedy sketch. The middle child was the sensitive one, the one who'd always offer me his last gummy bear. And the eldest, she was brilliant. Asked me one day, "Why does mommy say you don't like helping her anymore?" I nearly dropped my mug. Nicole was planting seeds I hadn't even noticed. Quiet, slippery manipulations wrapped in innocence. By the time I caught on, a narrative had already been crafted around me, one where I was selfish, ungrateful, cold. To make things worse, my parents believed her. Or rather, they didn't want to choose sides, which, let's be honest, is just another way of choosing the status quo. "She's trying her best," my mom would say. "You don't have kids, you don't understand." And when I tried to explain the pattern, the lies, the exploitation, the lack of accountability, my dad waved it off like I was overreacting. "That's just how families are," he mumbled over his crossword puzzle. "Funny how people want you to ignore emotional bruises just because there's no blood." The worst part, I started believing them. That maybe I was the problem. That maybe I was being too rigid, too independent, too unwilling to be needed. So I kept showing up, kept packing lunches, kept wiping runny noses, kept pretending I didn't see Nicole slipping further and further into a lifestyle that revolved around evading responsibility. She treated her children like accessories, cute for pictures, exhausting in real life. And I somehow was the babysitter, therapist, maid, and scapegoat all in one. There was one day I'll never forget. It was pouring rain, and I had just come home from a deposition analysis that had drained the last ounce of focus from me. Nicole called. "I have an emergency," she said. "Can you please take the kids tonight, Nicole?" I said gently. "I'm really wiped out. I need to rest." There was a pause, and then she snapped. "So now you're choosing sleep over your own family?" That sentence echoed in my head for hours. Sleep over family. As if choosing to protect my physical and emotional well-being was some sort of betrayal. I stared at the ceiling that night and realized I had been guilt-tripped into believing love means exhaustion, that real devotion means self-erasure. That was the moment something cracked. I didn't blow up, didn't yell. I simply texted her back, "I can't keep doing this. I love you. I love the kids. But this arrangement is hurting me. I need to step back." Her reply. 3 words. "You'll regret this." Not "I understand." Not "let's talk." just a threat masked as prophecy. She didn't call for 2 weeks. My phone was silent. And in that quiet, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: peace. Sure, I missed the kids. Their hugs, their chaotic energy, the way they'd pile on top of me during story time, like a pack of overexcited puppies. But I didn't miss being lied to. I didn't miss feeling like a convenience store for love and labor. Of course, my parents came knocking. "Nicole's really struggling," my mother said, her tone tinged with accusation. She had to call off work because she had no one to watch the kids. My father added, "Just go over there, help her get back on her feet, be the bigger person." I smiled tightly. I've been the bigger person for 6 years. I'm done growing. It was the first time I didn't flinch when standing my ground. That in itself felt like a small victory. And yet the silence didn't last. Because when a person builds their castle on lies, all it takes is one storm to bring the whole thing down. And Nicole's storm. It was just beginning. It started with a missed call from an unknown number at 7:42 a.m., a time when I'm usually knee-deep in linguistic databases and caffeine. I ignored it. Then another call, and then a message. "Hi, this is Ms. Lambert from Little Roots Elementary. Nicole listed you as the emergency contact for her children. We need someone to pick them up immediately." I stared at the message like it was in a foreign language. Emergency contact. She hadn't asked, hadn't told me, hadn't even spoken to me in weeks, and now apparently I was still the person she counted on when things collapsed. I called back out of sheer concern for the kids. Ms. Lambert answered in that polite but panicked tone only teachers and ER nurses truly master. "Nicole hasn't shown up," she said. "She didn't answer her phone. We tried all her numbers. The kids have been here since 7 and they're getting anxious." I exhaled slowly, then told her I'd be there in 20. As I grabbed my keys, I couldn't help but mutter, "Of course. Of course she did this." The school was only 10 blocks away, but the walk felt longer. Rain had left slick puddles that reflected the gray of the morning sky, and my steps echoed louder than usual against the wet sidewalk. When I reached the office, the kids ran toward me like I was a lighthouse in their storm. The youngest clung to my legs, sniffling. The oldest wouldn't meet my eyes. Back at my brownstone, I microwaved waffles, turned on cartoons, and tried to hide the frustration bubbling beneath my calm exterior. I didn't want them to feel abandoned, though. That's exactly what had happened. I asked gently, "Did Mommy say where she was going this morning?" The middle child piped up between bites. "She was yelling at someone on the phone last night. Said she didn't care what they thought." I didn't push further. They'd been through enough. But as they settled in with coloring books and juice boxes, I texted Nicole, then called, then texted again. No answer. By 2:00 p.m., I'd run out of both patience and plausible explanations. I called my parents. "Have you heard from Nicole?" I asked. "She told us she was home with the kids today," my mother said, confusion tinting her voice. "She's not," I replied flatly. "I've had them all morning. She didn't even tell me I was their emergency contact." Silence, then a soft, embarrassed sigh. "Maybe she's overwhelmed." "No," I said firmly. "She's irresponsible. There's a difference." An hour later, Nicole finally responded with a flurry of messages that felt more like accusations than explanations. "I just needed one day to myself. You always make me feel like a failure. I knew you'd judge me. No apology, no acknowledgement, just an emotional smoke bomb." I didn't reply right away. I needed time, space, sanity. That night, after the kids had dozed off on the couch in a messy pile of blankets and cartoon plushies, I sat down with a glass of wine and wrote a note by hand. I don't usually do that. My work is digital coded, structured. But sometimes emotion needs ink. "Nicole, I love you. I love these kids like they're mine. But I am not your safety net anymore. I am not your invisible labor. I am not your guilt sponge. You need help not from me, but from someone who can teach you how to take responsibility. I won't be responding to manipulation anymore. I won't be the one who shows up every time you vanish. Take care of them. And yourself. Riley." I left the note folded inside a picture book in the eldest child's backpack. I knew Nicole would find it. The next morning, I brought them to her apartment. She opened the door looking like she hadn't slept. Her hair was wild mascara smudged under her eyes, and her phone clutched tightly like it had betrayed her. She didn't say thank you, didn't say sorry, just muttered, "You could have told me you were mad." I blinked. "Nicole, I'm not mad. I'm done." She stared at me like that was worse. After I left, I expected tears, regret, maybe an apology voicemail. Instead, what I got was radio silence and eventually family group chat drama. Apparently, Nicole had told everyone I'd abandoned her in her darkest hour. One cousin even messaged me privately to ask if I was okay because Nicole said you were having a breakdown. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd, it deserved a laugh track. The thing about constantly bailing someone out is that you rob them of the chance to learn how to swim. Nicole had been floating on everyone else's energy for so long, she didn't even realize the water was rising. Still, I worried about the kids. I worried every time my phone buzzed. Every time I walked by their school. Every time I made scrambled eggs and remembered the way the youngest used to pronounce them, scribbled eggs. But I didn't cave. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in months. I reclaimed my time. I read for pleasure, not research. I took a dance class and tripped over my own feet so hard I got applause for effort. I went on a terrible date with a guy who said I don't believe in linguistics, which made me laugh so hard I paid for both meals just to escape faster. I was living again. Not surviving under the weight of someone else's chaos, but living. And yet a part of me knew that peace was temporary, because the next storm was already brewing. It happened on a Thursday, a damp, overcast kind of day that makes New York feel like one long exhale. I had just finished reviewing a transcript for a federal investigation, tedious, error-laced, and crawling with contradictions, when my phone rang again. This time, it was from a blocked number. I usually don't answer those, but something in my gut whispered, "Pick up, Riley," a woman's voice asked. "This is Detective Palmer with Family Services. Are you the aunt of Nicole Tarrant?" My stomach dropped. I stood slowly from my desk, heart tightening like a fist. "Yes, I am. There's been an incident at the apartment involving a domestic dispute. The children are safe, but we were informed you've been involved in their care before and are listed as a secondary contact." I could barely hear the rest. Just static and words like emergency placement, unsupervised safety concern. I dropped everything and took a cab to the station. When I arrived, the kids were seated in a side room, quiet, bundled in jackets too thin for the weather. The youngest had a tear-streaked face. The oldest looked at me the way soldiers look at medics, grateful but numb. I knelt in front of them and asked, "Are you hurt?" They shook their heads. "Are you scared?" The eldest nodded. Nicole wasn't there. I later learned she'd been taken into custody after neighbors called in a noise complaint, screaming, crashing, and a man yelling something about custody. When officers arrived, Nicole was hysterical. Her boyfriend high, and the kids alone in their room watching a movie loud enough to drown out the chaos. I signed temporary custody papers that night with a shaking hand and a heart torn between fury and sorrow. Fury at Nicole for reaching this low. Sorrow because I'd seen it coming months ago and no one wanted to listen. Back at my brownstone, I tucked the kids into the guest bed, made hot chocolate they barely touched, and sat at the kitchen table with my face in my hands. I wasn't crying. Not exactly. It was something heavier. A mix of mourning and responsibility, and that old familiar guilt clawing its way back up my spine. I didn't sleep. I cleaned, scrubbed floors that didn't need scrubbing, organized books alphabetically, rearranged the spice rack by intensity because apparently that's a thing when your life suddenly becomes a hurricane. The next morning, my mom called. She'd heard. "What happened?" she whispered. I told her the truth. Nicole spiraled. Again. This time it wasn't just lies. It was danger. There was silence. Then, "What do you need?" I almost said help. I almost said for you to finally see what I've been seeing for years. But I just said, support. She promised they'd come by later with groceries and clothes for the kids. And true to her word, they did. My father looked older than usual, more gray, more hunched. He didn't say much, just handed me a small bag with neatly folded baby clothes and said, "You're doing the right thing." It felt like a funeral in a way, the death of denial. Over the next week, my brownstone became part home, part triage center. School drop-offs, therapy appointments, CPS check-ins. I transformed from a forensic linguist to a temporary foster parent with a crash course in trauma management. The kids started to relax. The youngest stopped flinching when someone closed a door too loud. The oldest started humming while brushing her teeth. But Nicole, she was silent. Until one night she called. Blocked number again. I hesitated before answering. "Riley." She breathed into the phone. "They're taking everything from me." I stood still in my kitchen phone pressed to my ear like it was radioactive. "I didn't mean for it to go that far," she continued. He said he'd help. He said he loved us. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just asked, 'Why didn't you tell me you were drowning?' Because she snapped every time I looked at you, you looked disappointed. You always think you're better than me." There it was, the truth jagged and raw. "I never thought I was better," I said quietly. "I thought you deserved better, and you kept choosing worse." We sat in that silence for a long moment. Then she whispered, "Do they hate me?" "No," I said honestly, "but they're afraid." I could hear her sobbing. I could hear the wall she'd built over the years beginning to crack. "I need help," she said. It wasn't an apology, but it was something. A beginning. I told her I'd support her if she started therapy, if she submitted to a parenting course, if she agreed to regular supervision once she got her kids back. She didn't argue, just said, "Okay." And then she asked in the smallest voice I'd ever heard from her, "Do you think I'm a bad mom?" I paused, then replied, "I think you've been a lost one. But lost doesn't have to be forever." Nicole didn't call again for 3 days. And for the first time in a while, I didn't wait by the phone. My focus shifted entirely to the children creating a rhythm they could count on. Morning routines with chocolate chip pancakes on Friday's evening baths, with lavender bubbles and silly sea creature toys, and bedtime stories that turned into elaborate adventures with pirates, dragons, and detective squirrels. It was a kind of calm that felt earned, not given. One night, the oldest Sierra asked me, "Are we going to live here forever?" I froze for a moment. "Why do you ask?" She shrugged. "Because it's quiet here." That hit me harder than I expected. The kids weren't just adjusting, they were healing in ways I hadn't even realized they needed. And I knew then, deep in my gut, that what they'd come from wasn't just chaos. It was instability that had become their normal. That realization cemented something inside me. I had to protect them, even if it meant stepping into a role I'd once refused. But the calm didn't last long. My cousin Tasha invited us to her daughter's birthday party. I was hesitant, but the kids were excited and it felt wrong to deny them a rare moment of joy. So we went me with a trunk full of juice boxes, gift bags, and backup clothes, them in sparkly shoes and freshly combed hair. At first, everything was fine. Laughter, balloons, that unmistakable smell of cake frosting and cheap plastic toys. But midway through, I saw Nicole. She walked in like a shadow cutting across the sun, dressed up, but visibly thinner, nervous, guarded. Her eyes locked on me and then darted toward the kids. They ran to her, especially the youngest, who wrapped around her legs without hesitation. It hurt to watch. Love doesn't vanish in children just because pain entered the picture. They still saw her as mommy, still wanted her. I gave them space. Nicole knelt down, whispering to them, tears smudging the edge of her eyeliner. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I saw Sierra's face harden. She crossed her arms and said something that made Nicole flinch. Then Sierra walked back toward me and took my hand without a word. Nicole stood up and walked toward me with hesitant steps. Can we talk? We stepped out into the hallway near the coat racks and birthday banners. I'm doing the program, she said before I could speak. The parenting class. Therapy, too. That's good, I said. You needed it. She nodded. I just want to be in their lives again. I studied her. This wasn't manipulation, it was discomfort, vulnerability, maybe even sincerity. But I had to be careful. Being in their lives and having custody aren't the same. They need structure, stability. Nicole looked down. I know. I'm not asking for full custody. Not yet. Just, let me visit them. Supervised if it makes you feel better. Let them know I'm trying. It would have been easier to say no. To protect the little peace we'd found. But sometimes protecting peace doesn't mean building walls. It means teaching someone how to walk through the gate with respect. I'll think about it, I said. But it has to be on their terms. If they're not ready, you don't push. Got it. She nodded. Got it. And then she surprised me. I read your letter, she said softly. The one you left in the book bag. I didn't hate you for it. I hated that you were right. I swallowed. It wasn't meant to hurt you. It was meant to stop me from losing myself. I know, she said. You were the only one who ever told me the truth. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. We just stood there, two women who had once been girls playing board games in the living room, now trying to rebuild a broken bridge plank by plank. That evening back home, the kids asked, "Can Mommy visit us soon?" I looked at them carefully. Would you like that? The youngest nodded. The middle one asked, Will you be there too? Yes, I said. Always. Later that night, I emailed the family social worker and arranged for a trial visit, public place, supervised, lighthearted. A first step. Not toward reunion but reconciliation. But what I didn't expect was the backlash. The next morning, I woke up to 3 texts from relatives. Tasha says you humiliated Nicole. You're keeping the kids away on purpose. That's cold. This isn't your place. You're just an aunt. Funny how everyone has opinions when they've never changed a diaper at 3 a.m., paid for prescriptions out of pocket, or held a crying child who whispered, "Please don't take me back there." I didn't respond, because I didn't owe them anything, but it stung. Still, I took the kids to the park that weekend. Nicole met us there. The visit was brief, structured, and filled with cautious warmth. The youngest brought her a flower he picked near the swings. The middle one showed her a drawing. Sierra remained quiet but didn't pull away when Nicole hugged her goodbye. As we walked home, Sierra looked up at me and said, "You're not replacing her. You're just making sure we're okay." I smiled. Exactly. That night I wrote something in my journal I hadn't expected. This isn't about punishing Nicole. It's about protecting what's left of her children's innocence, and maybe in the process helping her rediscover her own humanity. It's strange how quickly children can adjust to dual realities. One moment they're giggling on the swings, the next, they're holding your hand a little tighter because they sense something unsaid. After that first visit, the kids didn't ask to see Nicole every day, but they did ask about her casually, softly, like testing the temperature of water before jumping in. Nicole, to her credit, didn't push. She messaged me twice a week with updates, screenshots of therapy appointments, progress reports from the parenting course, a grainy photo of her bookshelf with new titles like The Conscious Parent and Breaking Generational Cycles. It wasn't performative. There was something raw in her efforts, like someone trying to rebuild a house without instructions or nails. Meanwhile, our lives settled into a manageable rhythm. I started calling myself Aunt Riley, the chaos manager, which made the middle child laugh so hard he choked on his cereal. I showed them how to fold laundry like tiny hotel staff, and we had an ongoing joke that whoever left socks in the hallway owed the others a 5-minute massage. Let's just say I've had a lot of shoulder rubs lately, some better than others. Still, the weight of everything hung quietly in the background. I'd find myself staring at their backpacks, wondering how much longer they'd be mine to carry. I loved them fiercely, but I also knew loving them meant knowing when to let go, when to trust the system, flawed as it was, and when to hold firm. Then came the court hearing. A social worker warned me in advance that Nicole would be requesting monitored reunification, a legal term that sounded sterile, but meant she'd be asking to gradually regain physical custody under oversight. My gut twisted. I wasn't sure if it was fear or hope trying to dress up as fear. We arrived at family court early that morning. The kids stayed with my parents while I walked into the wood-paneled room that always smelled like old carpet and quiet desperation. Nicole sat at the other end wearing a blazer I'd never seen before and a nervous expression that looked borrowed from her teenage self. When the judge asked if I wanted to make a statement, I stood. "My name is Riley," I said. "I've cared for the children since their mother was taken into custody. During that time, they've thrived. They're sleeping through the night, eating regular meals, laughing, healing." I glanced at Nicole, then back at the bench. That said, I believe people can change. I've seen Nicole take real steps toward being the parent her kids need. But I also believe change doesn't erase damage. It earns opportunity. So yes, I support monitored reunification, but only with clear boundaries, ongoing evaluation, and the children's emotional safety as the top priority. The room was quiet when I finished. Nicole didn't speak. She just wiped a tear and nodded. The judge granted the motion with conditions: weekly supervised visits, therapy reports, and a 3-month review. I walked out of the courtroom feeling like I'd just held my breath underwater for too long. And when I exhaled, it came with the kind of relief that borders grief. That afternoon, the kids returned home as if nothing had happened. I made macaroni. They watched cartoons and life pressed on. But after dinner, Sierra lingered by the sink. "You're not going away, right?" she asked. "No," I said. "I'll always be here. Even if we go back with Mommy." I crouched beside her, looking into those eyes that had seen too much for her age. "Yes, even then. I'm your person. That doesn't change." She wrapped her arms around me so tightly I thought she'd never let go. That night after they were in bed, Nicole called. Her voice was steadier now. "Thank you," she said, "for standing up for them and for not tearing me down." "I didn't do it for you," I replied. "I did it for them, but I hope one day you'll prove me right." She let out a quiet laugh. "Me too." And for the first time, I believed she meant it. I still had doubts. Still questioned if I was enabling, if I was too soft, too forgiving. But life isn't built on perfect decisions, it's built on patterns. And for once, Nicole was showing a new one. The next visit was at the community center. Nicole brought puzzles, juice boxes, and a printed schedule. She stayed on the floor with them the whole time, listened, laughed, apologized when she knocked over a tower of blocks, and didn't snap when the youngest spilled grape juice on her jeans. The monitor took notes. I took mental snapshots. When we left, Sierra whispered, "She's trying, huh?" "Yeah," I replied. "She is." A few days later, I caught the middle child drawing a picture. It was of a house with a tree and 4 stick figures, one of them holding both Mommy's hand and mine. "Who's this?" I asked. He looked up and said, "That's our team." I swallowed the lump in my throat. Maybe we were a team. A messy, bruised, boundary-setting team, held together by choice rather than obligation. But it was still early. Healing isn't a straight road. It curves, it dips, it gets muddy. And sometimes it leads you back to the very place where everything began, just so you can walk it differently this time. Nicole's supervised visits became routine, and with each passing week, something about her shifted. Not dramatically, not like in the movies, where someone goes from disaster to redemption overnight, but gradually in ways only someone who knew her as deeply as I did could notice. She was more patient, more present. She didn't interrupt the kids to correct them. She didn't defend herself when Sierra pushed back. She just listened. Sometimes listening is the loudest form of love. One Saturday afternoon, while we were at the indoor play gym, the youngest tripped over a soft obstacle and burst into tears. Without hesitation, Nicole rushed over, scooped him into her arms, and gently rubbed his back until he calmed. I watched from across the room, heart caught in that quiet space between pride and caution. She was doing it, not perfectly, but sincerely. Later, when we were packing up, she approached me with a tentative smile. I was thinking, maybe I could take them to the museum next week, just for an hour. Still supervised, of course. I paused. Let's see how they feel about it. She nodded. Of course. In the car, I asked the kids what they thought. The middle one bounced in his booster seat and shouted, "Yes!" The youngest clapped. Sierra hesitated. "Will you come too?" "Yes," I said immediately. "Always." She nodded, quiet but not withdrawn. The museum visit was surprisingly smooth. Nicole arrived early, brought snacks, and didn't once check her phone. We walked through the dinosaur exhibit like an oddly assembled family, one with missing pieces, but holding together anyway. Nicole asked Sierra questions about the fossils, and Sierra, for the first time in weeks, answered without a single sarcastic jab. Afterward, as we stood under the skeleton of a stegosaurus, Nicole turned to me. This is what I imagined being a mom would feel like. I just never figured out how to get here. I didn't sugarcoat it. It's not about getting here once, it's about staying. She nodded slowly. I'm trying. And she was. But with every step forward, there were small shadows of resistance, mostly from the outside. A week after the museum trip, my Aunt Sharon cornered me at a family gathering. She was holding a paper plate with 3 different kinds of cake and a look that could slice steel. "You're making it too easy for her," she whispered. "She needs consequences. You're just handing her a second chance." I took a breath. "You're welcome to step in any time, Sharon. There's a laundry pile the size of Everest and a therapy bill I'd love to split." She blinked, caught off guard. "That's not what I meant." "No," I said, keeping my voice even, "but it's what you're not doing that matters. So maybe don't lecture me about what I am doing." She walked away with her plate and a little less frosting in her soul. Family can be its own battlefield. I learned that quickly. Everyone has an opinion, but not everyone has skin in the game. And the truth is, people hate when you disrupt their favorite narratives, like the one where Nicole's the mess and I'm the martyr. They don't know how to handle it when the roles start to blur. One night after the kids were asleep, Nicole texted me, "Thank you for not giving up on me. I know I made it almost impossible." I stared at the message for a long time before replying. It's not about not giving up. It's about deciding when love means stepping in and when it means stepping back. That week, Sierra asked me something unexpected. "Do you think Mommy loves us more now?" I sat down beside her. "I think your mom always loved you, but I think she's learning how to show it better." She nodded thoughtfully, then asked, "Can people unlearn being selfish?" "Not easily," I said. "But yes, if they really want to, and if they understand what they're losing." Then she asked the hardest question of all. "What if she messes up again?" I didn't lie. "Then we deal with it. Together." And that somehow seemed to be enough. Nicole's next step was unsupervised visits, short, closely monitored by the court, but still a huge leap. When I told the kids, they reacted with cautious optimism. The youngest danced around the kitchen, the middle one immediately asked if he could bring his action figures, and Sierra, true to form, simply said, "We'll see." The first unsupervised visit lasted 2 hours. Nicole took them to a bookstore cafe and read to them while they munched on muffins. She sent me photos without being asked. One of the boys curled up on beanbags, one of Sierra flipping through a graphic novel. No filters, no fake smiles, just life. When they came back, the kids were bubbly but tired. "Mommy said she's making us our own room soon," the youngest beamed. Sierra handed me a bookmark and said, "She didn't cry once." That night, after everyone was asleep, I stood in the kitchen staring at a dish in the sink that I didn't have the energy to wash. I thought about how far we'd come, how many breakdowns, tantrums, court dates, and awkward family dinners it had taken just to reach this fragile moment of possibility. Nicole wasn't perfect. Neither was I. But somehow, together, we were managing to piece something back together that I thought was lost. And maybe, just maybe this time, we'd hold on to it. The birthday invitation came tucked inside a red envelope with glitter stickers and crooked handwriting. Sierra's 8th birthday was approaching fast, and I had planned a quiet gathering, cupcakes, board games, and a movie night at home. But when Nicole showed up one afternoon clutching the envelope and a hopeful smile, I knew she had a different vision. "I was thinking we could plan it together," she said, hesitating slightly. "Maybe. At the park with balloons and her school friends." I watched her carefully. She wasn't steamrolling me. She was trying to include herself without erasing me, a small but monumental difference. "Okay," I said. "Let's plan it." But we split the responsibilities. And the budget. Nicole nodded so fast I almost laughed. In the weeks leading up to the party, she called regularly to confirm details: cake flavor, RSVP numbers, party favors. She even sent me a Google Doc titled Sierra's Best Day Ever, Draft 1. It was clumsy and color-coded and kind of adorable. I let her handle the decorations while I focused on food and logistics. For the first time, it felt like co-parenting instead of crisis management. The day of the party arrived with perfect weather. Prospect Park bloomed under a cloudless sky, and the playground was filled with squeals and sunblock and picnic blankets. Nicole arrived early, setting up a happy birthday banner with trembling hands and a grin so wide it threatened to split her face. "Do I look like I know what I'm doing?" she whispered as she tied the last balloon. "No," I said, "but you look like you care." Guests arrived. Gifts piled up. Kids ran in wild loops. Sierra beamed. But of course, things couldn't stay simple. Around the second hour, Nicole's ex-boyfriend showed up. Not invited. He wasn't Sierra's father, just one of those ghosts from Nicole's past who never seemed to stay dead. He leaned against a tree with sunglasses and that smug grin that made my skin crawl. Nicole froze. The color drained from her face. I walked over calmly. "You need to leave," I said. "Relax," he said, laughing. "It's a public park. Not your party. Not your kid. Go." Nicole stood beside me, then voice steady. "She's right. Leave." There was a tense silence. Then he shrugged and walked away, but not before muttering something under his breath that I won't repeat here. Nicole exhaled shakily. "Thank you. I won't let anyone ruin her day," I said. "Not even history." And that was when it happened. In front of cupcakes and cousins and chaos, Nicole took the mic literally. She tapped it nervously and stood by the folding table with a trembling plate in her hand. "I just want to say something," she said. "Most of you know I haven't been the most reliable person, but I'm trying. And today I want to thank the person who's kept this family from falling apart. Aunt Riley." I froze. She didn't have to step in. She didn't have to care the way she does. But she did. "And Sierra, your Aunt Riley is the reason your smile is this bright today." My throat tightened. Sierra turned and gave me a hug that knocked the wind out of me. The crowd clapped. A few aunts wiped tears. I stood there holding my niece, wondering how a day built on sugar and balloons had somehow become a turning point. After the party, as we packed up the last of the folding chairs and half-eaten cupcakes, Nicole approached me again. "I didn't know how to say that until now," she said. "For so long I felt like saying thank you meant admitting I failed. But I think maybe it just means I'm starting over." "It does," I said. "And starting over isn't weakness, it's courage." We stood in silence watching Sierra chase bubbles across the grass, her laughter mixing with the golden hum of evening. The boys lay in a pile of frosting and exhaustion nearby, faces sticky but content. As we gathered the kids and loaded the car, Sierra turned to Nicole and said, "This was the best day ever." Nicole smiled, eyes shining. That was the plan. That night, back at home after the kids were in bed, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window watching the city's lights flicker like embers. I thought about all the nights I'd sat here alone wondering if I'd made the right choices, if I was too harsh, too tired, too much. But today I had no doubts. I opened my journal and wrote, "Today Nicole stepped up. Not perfectly, but with heart. I saw a mother trying not for approval, but for her kids. And I saw them love her back not because she was flawless, but because she showed up. Maybe that's all parenting is, showing up, even after the worst days, especially then." I closed the journal, took a long sip, and whispered into the dark, "We're going to be okay." It started with a knock at the door just after sunset. I wasn't expecting anyone, and for a second I thought it might be a neighbor asking about the recycling schedule or a kid selling chocolate bars for a school trip. But when I opened it, I saw Sierra standing on the front steps, clutching something to her chest. "Mom said I could give this to you," she said. Eyes wide but steady, she handed me a folded piece of notebook paper with colorful doodles along the edge. I crouched down and gave her a warm smile. "Thank you, sweetheart. Want to come in for hot cocoa?" She nodded. Inside, the boys were already halfway through a puzzle. I got Sierra settled on the couch with her favorite fuzzy blanket and opened the letter. It wasn't typed, it wasn't formal. It was written in Nicole's loopy handwriting with a blue pen and a few smudges that looked suspiciously like teardrops. "Riley, if you're reading this, it means I'm finally doing what I should have done a long time ago, saying thank you with my whole heart. Not just in passing, not in guilt, not as an apology band-aid, but because I mean it, because I see it now. You didn't just babysit. You didn't just fill in. You raised them when I couldn't. You taught them safety, structure, joy. And you taught me what showing up really means. I failed in ways I didn't understand until I saw it reflected in Sierra's silence, in the boys' clinging hands. But you never stopped showing them love. Or me. I know this can't erase the damage, but I hope it can be part of the healing. I've enrolled in long-term therapy. I'm staying away from anyone who threatens the stability we've built. I'm not asking for control, I'm asking for trust. Slowly, gently. Whatever role I get to play in their lives moving forward, I'll earn it. I promise. Love, Nicole." I read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and tucked it into my journal. When I looked up, Sierra was watching me. "Did you like it?" she asked softly. "I did," I said. "Very much." Then she whispered, "She read it to me before she gave it to you." She cried. I pulled her into my arms. "That's okay. Sometimes crying means we're finally telling the truth." Later that night, after dinner and baths and stories, I found a new drawing tucked into my coat pocket. It was from the boys. 4 stick figures again, but this time with a house behind them, a dog I didn't recognize, and above it, a bright yellow sun, and the words, "Our family." No labels. No need to define who was who, just together. The next day, Nicole came over not for a visit but to talk. We sat at the kitchen table while the kids played outside, their laughter floating through the window like music from a happier season. "I talked to the caseworker," she said. "She thinks we can begin planning for reintegration. Gradual, careful, starting next month." I nodded slowly. "That's what we've been working toward." "I know," Nicole said, voice cracking slightly. "But I'm terrified. What if I mess up again? What if I disappoint them again?" I reached across the table and placed my hand over hers. "Then you own it, and you keep going. But you don't get to stop trying because you're afraid." She looked down. "What if they love you more than they love me?" I exhaled. "Nicole, they love you because you're their mother. They love me because I've been here. But love isn't a competition. It's a net. We're both part of it." She nodded, eyes glassy. "I want to be better, not just for them, for me." That evening we cooked dinner together, chicken stir-fry that the boys mostly picked around Sierra, supervising with her usual serious face. We laughed, spilled rice on the floor, and tried unsuccessfully to make fortune cookies from scratch. It was messy, imperfect, full of burned edges, and completely beautiful. As Nicole helped load dishes into the sink, she turned and said, "I was so scared you'd never forgive me." "I haven't forgotten," I said, honestly. But forgiveness isn't erasure. It's a choice to move forward. And that's what we did. Step by step, visit by visit, the kids started spending more evenings at Nicole's apartment. She'd send updates, photos of meals she cooked, crafts they made, notes from school. I'd watch from a respectful distance, ready to catch them if they stumbled, but resisting the urge to hover. One afternoon, Sierra asked if she could bring a framed photo from my house to her mom's. "Which one?" I asked. She pointed to the picture of us on the couch, all three kids piled onto me like puppies. "Why that one?" I asked, touched but curious. "Because I want it at both houses," she said. "So it always feels like one home." I knelt down and kissed her forehead. "Then it's yours." That night, I sat alone in the quiet, thinking of how far we'd come. The lies, the silence, the resentment, the heartbreak. And now this strange, sacred middle ground where healing lives, where family isn't defined by perfection but by persistence. I don't know what comes next. I don't know how long I'll be the backup parent, the bridge, the glue. But I know this: we are more than our worst seasons. And love, when chosen deliberately over and over, can change even the most broken of stories. The official hearing came on a Wednesday afternoon. The sky hung low and gray, the kind of overcast that feels like it's waiting to break. I wore a blazer I hadn't touched since a conference 2 years ago, and Nicole wore a navy dress that looked like she'd ironed it 3 times. We didn't speak much on the way in. There wasn't much to say. Everything that mattered had already been shown. The judge reviewed the reports: clean drug tests, consistent therapy attendance, the parenting course completed, with a glowing recommendation. There were letters from the kids' teachers, notes from their social worker, even a handwritten card from Sierra, tucked into the folder with little stars drawn next to the word "safe." Nicole sat very still. I could see her clenching her hands beneath the table. When the judge spoke, her voice was even, deliberate. "Nicole Tarrant, in light of your efforts, the court grants partial custody reinstatement, effective immediately, under ongoing review." Nicole burst into tears. Not the dramatic kind, just soft, steady sobs, like something long held had finally been released. I didn't cry. I just sat there with my palms flat against the cool table and let out the quietest breath of relief. Outside the courthouse, Nicole turned to me with red eyes and whispered, "I didn't think I'd get this back." "You didn't get it back," I said. "You rebuilt it." She nodded, too overwhelmed to speak, and I handed her a folded sheet of paper I'd written the night before. It wasn't a speech, just a few lines I wanted her to carry with her. "You are not the sum of your failures. You are the weight of your return. Every moment you choose differently is a moment you rewrite your story. Keep choosing." That weekend, the transition began. The kids spent 2 full days and one night with Nicole. I paced more than I'd like to admit. I checked my phone constantly, even though I promised I wouldn't. But then photos arrived: Sierra baking cookies, the boys building a blanket fort, Nicole sitting on the floor reading them, "Where the Wild Things Are." The captions were simple: "We're okay." Day 1. We survived. No one burned the house down. I laughed. I cried. Sometimes both at once. Monday morning, the doorbell rang. It was Sierra, alone. Before panic could set in, she handed me an envelope and said, "Mom said I should give this to you myself." Inside was a card. On the front it said, "Thank you for being their light." And inside, in Nicole's handwriting, "There are no perfect parents. But there are rare people who step in when it counts most. You were their lighthouse when I was lost at sea. I'll never forget that. I hope one day I get to be that for someone else." Tucked into the card was a drawing from the boys: another house, another sun, but this time there were 2 homes connected by a rainbow. I smiled. Over the next few weeks, the rhythm of our lives shifted again. Nicole now picked the kids up from school twice a week. I still packed emergency snacks just in case. On Saturdays, we alternated sleepovers. On Sundays, we had breakfast together, Nicole, the kids, and me. We called it blended brunch, and the kids insisted we make pancakes shaped like animals. Mine usually looked like blobs, but they didn't mind. There were bumps. One week, Nicole forgot a school form. Another time, one of the boys had a meltdown and asked to stay with me instead. But instead of falling apart, Nicole called. We talked. We problem solved. Like teammates. Like grown-ups. One evening, while helping Sierra with her homework, she paused and looked at me. Aunt Riley. Yeah, sweet pea. Are you proud of Mommy? I set my pencil down and nodded. Yes, I really am. Sierra beamed. Me too. And just like that, I knew the hardest part was behind us. Not because it was over, but because now we were all moving in the same direction. Sometimes I still feel the tug to protect, to overfunction, to step in before the cracks appear. But then I remember what healing looks like. It's not control. It's trust. And Nicole has earned that trust piece by painstaking peace. A few nights ago, after the kids were asleep, Nicole and I sat on the stoop of her building. She passed me a mug of tea and said, "You ever think we'd get here?" "Not for a while," I said truthfully. She laughed. "Me neither. But I'm glad we did." We sat in silence, watching the streetlights flicker on. And I realized something I hadn't been ready to admit before. This wasn't just a story about a niece who lied and an aunt who stepped away. This was a story about what it means to return, to rebuild, to forgive. Not blindly, not without boundaries, but bravely. So if you've ever been torn between protecting someone and protecting yourself, know this. Both can be true, and sometimes the most loving thing you can do for another person is to stop rescuing them and start showing them how to rescue themselves. Share your thoughts about Nicole's decision. Was she being too harsh, or was she simply protecting herself after years of being hurt? This question invites you to reflect on the power of boundaries in family and the quiet strength it takes to love without losing yourself. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I'd love to know where you're listening from in the world. Thank you for listening to Nicole's story. Don't forget to share your thoughts and follow for more honest and meaningful family stories.